So we should be live. A
Ah,
isn't life great? A warm hello to Henry Hertz in San Diego.
thank you. Happy to be here with you, Mel.
And I can't tell you how delighted I am. You are such an enigmatic soul. Um,
Uh-oh.
Trained as an engineer, several degrees in engineering, and then political science. And then you became a writer, very successful, so many children's books, and you have monster books, and you have adult anthologies. You are all over the place, man. But before I forget, I have to introduce myself too, Henry. I'm Mel Rosenberg, the host of the Children's Literature Channel of the New Books Network. And I'm here with the fantastic and amazing Henry Hertz. And Henry, I think let's start out by introducing the book that brought us together. That's a pun. I Am Gravity. Oy vey, I apologize for that. A few words about this gorgeous book.
It's the second in a series of creative nonfiction picture books that I've written, or sometimes those are called informational fiction, or the idea is a force of nature tells its own story. So it's anthropomorphic autobiography of gravity. Gravity explains how it operates and how it's helped people and what it does. And it's really fascinating when you dig into it because life on Earth would not be possible without gravity. Earth would not be possible without gravity.
I love the creative nonfiction term. A few more words about it. The publisher, the illustrator.
Sure. So the publisher is Tilbury House. They are now part of Sleeping Bear, which is part of Cherry Lake Publishing Group. The illustrator, Mercè López, unbelievably good. Your listeners may not know, but with a traditionally published book, typically the author has very little say in who gets to illustrate the book if they're not the illustrator themselves. So no one would want to see a book that I illustrate. I got very lucky with her in that she does stunning, stunning work. This is the second book. I Am Smoke was the first book, and that also took my breath away, no pun intended. Um, she just does gorgeous work, and you just never know what you're going to get with an illustrator. So thrilled, and she's on. We have signed to do two more books in the coming years, and we're going to, of course, want her to illustrate. So I'm very happy about that.
She also did Smoke.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean before Smoke, the one that came out before Smoke. This is
The
Smoke.
smoke
Okay.
smoke is the first one. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Um, and you're in San Diego, which is far away from the smoke, and that's a good thing.
At the
Um,
moment, yeah.
let's wish all our friends in the Los Angeles area good health and pulling out of this catastrophe.
Definitely.
Not that here in Israel we don't have a catastrophe, but
Yeah, yeah. You have your own set of problems. I'm praying that the peace treaty holds.
Emir Sashem, as they say. Henry, so you're incredible. Read a little bit of the text here because the pictures are outstanding, and the text is so lyrical. You're taking something that is so dry, so physics, gravity, Einstein, Newton, and you're making it alive for young kids. Read a little bit of it.
Sure. Yeah, that is a challenge with these books because I do want to be true to the science, but I also know that I'm writing something for very young kids. They're being read too, and they might be 4, 5, 6, 7 years old. So, um, yeah, this is my favorite spread out of I Am Gravity.
Wow.
It's how the book starts. I am gravity. You feel me, but cannot see me. I reach everywhere, touching everything. A butterfly landing on your outstretched palm, a whale diving deep, the moon far above. So, as you say, it is intended to be very lyrical, but it also is kind of scientific. The next spread says, I gather hydrogen clouds in the vast, cold remoteness of space, compressing them into giant swirling knots. I squeeze so fiercely that hydrogen can fuse into helium, forging stars. There is light, far-flung lamps twinkle in the night sky. And of course, the artwork helps bring this concept to it's showing that, but it's also showing the kid looking outside up at the stars. So it's trying to link the child's experience with what they're reading about.
But one of the other things I love about this is you don't compromise on the language. And I love this. You're not talking down to young children, you're talking up to them. You're giving them difficult words, and there's nothing wrong with that. I actually love it. So they can actually grow into this book. They can understand what they understand at any level. It's multi-leveled, and it also, with the gorgeous artwork, it entices them to grow in the book, and also maybe as young scientists.
And there is, both of these books have extended back matter that goes in more into the science behind the phenomenon.
I must say that I'm a scientist, and I learned a few things from your back matter.
Awesome.
So, as the Jews say, Yishar Koyach. Henry, let's go back now to your life, and then we're going to talk about all your anthologies.
We're going to discuss all my bad choices. We don't have enough time.
Hanukkah anthology, Oy vey, and more. You've published over a dozen books and a dozen more on the way. Run us through your life.
Oh my goodness. Let's just focus on my writing life. So
hold on. Is this like, don't ask me about my life, Mel, or something?
No, but you really want me to, how far back do you want me to go?
As a kid. I mean, you're an author now.
Yes.
You're one in 50,000, because most authors never get a traditional publishing deal. You've had many, and some of them you brokered by yourself, without an agent. It's Michigan. So we want to know a little bit about you. What were you like as a kid? Were you a science nerd or English lit?
I'm trying to think. This will probably give some insight into my personality. When I was a very young kid, garbage trucks would collect the trash from the homes without the automated claw that they have now. So there'd be a driver and there'd be a guy standing on the back of the open garbage truck, and he would ride up, get off, grab your trash can, dump it in. And so that was my first career goal, was to be the guy in the back of a garbage truck, because that looked like a lot of fun, clinging onto the back of a moving vehicle. Happily, my choices got better. As a kid, I loved baseball. I had a really good throwing arm. But then I got to middle school, I kind of switched to soccer. I tended to like math and science more than, I was a good student, but English and social studies weren't as interesting. And then I kind of hit middle school, and I read The Lord of the Rings, and I started reading more fantasy and science fiction, which stuck with me to this day. Was good at math and science, so ended up getting an engineering degree from Cornell. Hold
on a second here. Did you have any I had trouble signing up to study science. Did you have any trouble signing up for engineering? Did something about you say, Henry, you should be an arts major, or were you just happily content and complacent to study engineering?
Yeah, I was good at math and science. Engineering interested me. My father was an engineer. So it wasn't like some people cringe when they think of engineering, just like most people cringe when they think of statistics, but it was the right choice for me. I was interested in it. I was not a writer at that time. So I didn't have anything pushing. It wasn't at that young age I was like, oh, I got to write for kids. I loved reading, but I had no interest in writing. That came later. So
okay. And then
college,
you did a master's degree?
Yeah, I did. So this is during a time when if you're working for an engineering company, they would pay for you to go to school at night. So I was like, well, why not? Why not? It's a free degree. So I got a master's degree in engineering, and then they were still paying. So I was always interested in defense work. So let me back up. In middle school, a good friend, George, introduced me to wargaming, which are board games that simulate historical battles. So Panzerblitz, some people may know that it's a tactical level warfare between the Russians and the Germans during World War II. That got me interested in gaming and heightened my interest in World War II. I was a history buff in that regard. And so you'll see this is all going to come together later in life. These are the seeds that later grew. Um, I was very interested in defense work.
Your World War II monster anthology.
Exactly. That's the culmination of both threads, fantasy
Okay,
reading and wargaming.
keep going.
Keep going. I'll show you that book later. So my first few jobs out of college were defense oriented. And so again, they would pay for you to get a graduate degree. So like, okay. And Georgetown has this really amazing program in national security studies. I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to do that. It's like free education. Why not? So I did that. And that's how I accumulated so many degrees, because somebody else was willing to pick up the tab, which was nice. So that eventually morphed. I moved to San Diego with a defense contractor.
Henry, hold on a sec. You did not tell the viewers and listeners what kind of engineering, what kind of work you did.
It's called industrial engineering. So it's analyzing systems to try to make them more efficient. So it's more general than, say, electrical engineering or chemical engineering. It uses math and statistics to study systems and figure out how to make them work better.
And also you work more with human beings in this particular.
I don't know. I work with human. I think that's a stereotype. We engineers all work with human beings.
Okay.
I don't think we're locked up in a dark closet somewhere.
No, not at all. But I mean, industrial engineering is more I mean, you correct me. It's more about managing things and interacting with the people who are managing things. At least that's
Yes,
what I
but
thought it used to be.
you are interacting with the people, but only in the sense that you're helping to understand. First, you need to interact with them to understand what the issues are, and then you need to interact with them to explain, hey, based on my mathematical analysis, this is what I suggest we do moving forward. So, um, yeah, it's because you don't typically, unless, well, as a consultant, that's how you work. If you're an employee of the company, it's the same either way. You still have to convince people, hey, this is what I think we should do because here's mathematically, this looks like this will work better for us. It'll reduce costs, or it'll increase the speed of our operation, or it'll, reduce mistakes. So, and it's funny because then I kind of drifted away from that. I became, when the web came out, the World Wide Web came out, I immediately jumped on that because I was like, that I could see the potential of that. So I helped form the first division in the company that I was with that focused on making websites for other companies. And over time, these websites became much more complex, became web applications. And so I was managing software developers for the longest time. And then my career made a and I still no creative writing. And my career transitioned. I was like, there was an economic downturn. My position was eliminated, and they made available, the government made available some funding for you to get training. And I got what's called a Lean Six Sigma Black Belt. So it's a certification in process improvement, which kind of brings the circle around because it's related to operations research. I hadn't been doing any kind of process improvement when I was managing software development. And this kind of brought it back home. I was like, yes, this resonates with me. This is who I am. My brain is just wired in a very analytical way. So when I look at something, even it's just instinct to think about, is that thing working as well as it could, or could we tweak it in a way that would make it work better? So I started doing process improvement consulting. I was working on my own. I teamed up with a former client who had hung up his shingle a couple of years earlier doing process improvement. So he was a great guy, and we ended up working together for, I don't know, a decade. And in the middle of doing that, I had two young kids. I think maybe they were around 4 and 6 when I thought, I love reading fantasy. I want them to love reading fantasy too. I didn't know enough about the industry to realize that I probably could have found fantasy picture books and fantasy chapter books, but I wasn't aware of any. So I was like, I'm going to write one just for them. I'm going to grab images off the internet because I'm not planning to sell this thing. I'm just going to use it to spark their interest in reading fantasy. And that led to a delightful set of circumstances, a delightful set of results. One of which was they reviewed the book that I drafted and they gave me feedback. 4 and 6. They gave me feedback. They came up with names for the characters. And I was like, okay, this is fun. It's turning into a bigger project in a good way. Um, and we were like, you know what? Maybe we could self-publish this. I can't use the artwork that I grab off the internet, so I'll hire an illustrator. And we had like 2 false starts with an illustrator that basically a couple of years went by, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is not going to work, because both times the illustrator went into it part way and then flaked out. But I was like, all right, I'm going to try this one last time. And so I tried it one last time, and the third guy had the most amazing illustrations. We got the football into the end zone. We self-published it. And then the kids were like, you know what, I'm going to turn this into a full-on learning experience. So we self-published. We would go to places, we'd go to elementary schools where I could arrange it, or we'd go to farmers markets, get a booth, and we would sell our book. And the kids were selling it. The kids were learning about running a small business. I told them, you get all the profits, but remember, you have to understand what that means. We have to pay money to be here. We have to pay money for the books. What we sell, that money, then we subtract out our costs, and what's left over, you guys get to split. So
what we otherwise would call benevolent child slavery here.
Exactly. It's for their own good. They only worked. I mean, they understood they needed to sell it if they wanted a profit. So they got it. And so it was a great learning experience for them. And in this process, I discovered that I loved writing for children. It was not my original intent to become a writer when I started this. It was really just to inspire them to like fantasy. So I started writing picture books for hopefully to be traditionally published. I ended up actually, I self-published.
Hold on. As somebody who self-published for many years and then had the coin drop, that I had to try and be traditionally self-published. Was there like a moment when you had this realization? Did it dawn on you over time? What happened? Because, to break into traditional publishing,
yeah, it's challenging. I don't know that there was a single moment. I think there's a sort of a seal of approval and a prestige that comes with, yeah, I convinced a company to invest money in having my work illustrated and printed and put out there in the world. It's a challenge. Can I do this? Can I write something good enough that a publisher would be like, yeah, I want to make that thing go into the world. So I don't know that it was any epiphany. It just sort of became a goal. We ended up self-publishing a couple more books because I could, and I still wanted to continue the project for my kids' benefit in terms of being involved in writing books, being involved in the business of selling books. So we did that for a while, and then I drafted one, and you'll get a kick out of it because it's also monster related. Monster Goose nursery rhymes. So take classic children's nursery rhymes like Little Jack Horner and Little Miss Muffet, and change the lyrics so that there's a monster involved. And so instead of Little Miss Muffet, it's Little Witch Muffet. She's a witch. Little Jack Horner, instead of being a kid, he's a troll. So and I didn't know any better, and I ended up reaching out and having somebody illustrate it, even though normally you don't need to do that as a traditionally published author. I didn't know any better, but it worked out fine because the illustrator, I have a good eye. I can't draw worth of beans, but I have a good eye, and her name is Abigail Larson, and that name may be familiar because she is one of the Netflix's character animators for Blue Eye Samurai, which is a massively popular series on Netflix. Very talented lady. Anyway, she did the illustrations, and then I set about trying to sell it myself. I wasn't able to get an agent, so okay, the smaller houses you can submit to directly, so that's what I did. And I wasn't getting any traction. I wasn't getting any response. And I was probably a week away from saying, oh, well, I gave it a try. I'm just gonna self-publish it like I did the others because I knew how to do it. And once you've done it a couple of times, it's pretty straightforward. So I was like a week away from making that decision, and Pelican responded to so I was directly submitting to publishing houses. Pelican said, we'd like your book. I was like, oh, So it just goes you. I mean, you have to be persistent and have a thick skin in children's publishing. But that's like twice where I almost gave up, uh, and I'm glad that I didn't because my writing career would not have been the same.
So Henry, there's a lot of really talented writers that I'm not interviewing today because they gave up. And you give up and you do whatever you do. But you can correct me, but I have this feeling that in addition to getting the satisfaction or the recognition, we also get our manuscripts handled by professional people who know how to do a better job than we do by
Yes, definitely,
ourselves.
absolutely. Uh, if you haven't done what I did, they help you find an appropriate. Well, they don't help you. They find an appropriate illustrator. They provide the art direction that I'm pretty good at that, but most authors probably are not. And even if I think I'm good at it, they're better. And then, of course, they know how to get the book reviewed by trade review organizations. They know how to get the book placed in Barnes and Noble.
You forgot for me what's the most important, which is they take your
Editing.
text and to show you where to cut your little
Yes.
darlings and excessive adjectives, adverbs, and whatever. So Pelican published it.
Yes.
Wonderful.
And yeah, and that was the start. And then they ended up buying. I did a second one also with Abigail Larson. It was a parody of "If you give a mouse a cookie, it's when you give an imp a penny." So there's a little imp. It's set in a medieval setting, and there's a little imp that always gets into trouble. And so Pelican did that one as well. So
I'm thinking.
I was off and running at that point.
Yeah, I'm thinking about another one. I would write if you give a fox a bunny. I don't know whether anybody would buy that. But Henry,
That sounds a little dark.
well, it's coming from you, you know. You're bringing out the other melody. But
Oh no.
gay vase. I might do a monster book yet. But here's the thing. We want to tell the audience that this is not the the kosher way to do it, because the moment that you pay an illustrator, you send it in, most publishers will not look at it.
Right. I mean, I won't say. Yeah. Let me just put a. You're right in general. The fine point I would say is, it looks amateurish. It looks like the me. It looks like I didn't know what I was doing. I wasn't familiar with the industry when I hired somebody to do the artwork prior to selling the book. That is not normal. It is definitely not necessary. If the artwork is good enough, like, it's not the only time I've done that, and I've been able to sell my artwork, sell my book that way with art, to medium and small publishers. I don't know that a big five. First of all, you need an agent to submit to a big five, but I certainly wouldn't do it anymore. From now on, I'm just do the writing, let them pick the illustrator. They know more illustrators than I do. They know what style of illustration will probably best suit the text. So the the recommended thing, do as I say, not as I do. The recommended thing is to, if you're not an illustrator as well, just make your writing as perfect as you can. Let the publisher worry about the illustrations.
Okay, so I mean that's the conventional wisdom, and now I'm going to retrace this and make a different argument. And because you're a scientist engineer, this is something that bothers me all the time. The chances of submitting a manuscript and getting it published by a traditional house are about 1 in 3,000. Those are the bare odds. Okay.
That sounds optimistic, but go ahead.
Okay. Very, 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 very low. Holiday House once made a calculation. It came out to about 1 in 3,000 manuscripts. It could be 1 in 5,000. It could be 1 in 6,000. But the chance of it happening is so small that all of the people that I interview, including you, are outliers. And we have these stories that we bumped into somebody. In my case, I had a legal thing with an editor in Israel, and I caught his attention by having to solve a legal issue. There's always these things, and I was a week away from this, and I was a week away from that, and every story is wonderful, but really nobody, including us, can retrace these steps because these are outliers. These are such rare occurrences. I don't know if I'm making any sense.
No, you're right. It is. an exercise in hope when you start trying to get your work traditionally published. But what is it? Wayne Gretzky, the great hockey player, said, or was it Michael Jordan, the great basketball player? You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So, yeah, the odds are low, but they're zero if you don't try. So, unless you want to go self-publishing, and there's a whole different argument. There's pros and cons to self-publishing. I think it's entirely appropriate for some people, but for some people, they want the prestige and the better quality because you've got a big team behind you associated with a traditionally published book.
I agree with you. So then, with the Pelican and two books under your Pelican wing, how did you continue?
I mean, it was more of the same where I would write stuff and I would
And this is all unagented.
correct all in agencies. So I would write things. I would still, if I wrote something new that I thought was really good, I would first try and get an agent for it. And failing that, I would submit it myself because you can do that to the smaller and the medium-sized houses. And persistence paid off. I sold some more, and then at some point, I think it was with maybe my fifth book. It's a dinosaur pirate book called Captain Rex and His Clever Crew. That caught the attention of an agent, Deborah Warren, and so she helped me sell that, and then she represented me for a while. And I kept doing it. I kept honing my craft because I'm still not the best picture book writer ever by far. So
I think
even if you've sold a book, it doesn't mean you stop. You keep trying to get better and better.
Listen, I am not only in awe, I am in the jealousy of that book. It's a gorgeous book, and so beautifully written, by somebody who claims to be a science engineer. So I'm jealous in a good way, Henry. But let's not only talk about you have Out Smoke and Gravity, you have I Am Wind and I Am Light coming out. But you have other genres. You have anthologies, fantasy monster anthologies, an anthology of Hanukkah. You cover the whole gamut of literature almost.
Well, yeah. So I'll explain how that happened. Again, it goes back to my roots, probably from reading Where the Wild Things Are in elementary school. Loved fantasy, and then very quickly learned about science fiction. Loved science fiction and fantasy. So I've been a voracious reader since I was a kid, and I was reading adult sci-fi and fantasy in probably sixth grade and up. So that's where my heart lay. But I got my start with picture books. Honestly, it was a decision based on two factors. One, I love the format. I love the illustration-rich nature of picture books. But the other is they're roughly 500 words for a fictional picture book. I was being an operations research engineer. I was being an industrial engineer by, I can climb a learning curve much faster on a 500-word book than on a 90,000-word young adult novel. So let me start with the shortest word count and get good at that, and then I can kind of build my way up. So that's how I ended up starting with picture books. And then I was like, okay, I would like to write a middle grade novel, but before I write a novel for middle grade, maybe I should, again, learn on shorter pieces because it's also easier to get feedback on a 5,000 word short story than it is on a 35,000 word middle grade novel. So I started writing short stories for middle grade markets. And once you start doing that, it's not much more to go start writing short stories for a young adult audience and then not adult audience. So I'm writing short stories, mostly fantasy and science fiction. And then I kind of drifted into horror because, of course, I'm friends with Jonathan Mayberry, who's a very successful author who writes in multiple genres, including horror. And horror is like if you're writing dark fantasy, horror is like the cousin of dark fantasy. So it's not hard to slip over the border into horror if you're writing dark fantasy. So anyway, I'm writing all these short stories and submitting those to markets. Those get published by magazines and in anthologies. And I realized, you know what, I could run my own anthology. It actually combines my two passions. It combines all my experience as project manager with my experience as a writer. and I get to rub elbows with other authors who I respect and admire. So my first anthology was self-published, um, but I had huge author names participate because I basically did two things. I said, just you can give me a reprint. I don't need original. So it involved very little work on their part. It's literally, oh, here's the file, boom. And I also gave away almost all the revenue to the authors. So my first anthology is the only one that I self-published, has like I don't know, 8 New York Times bestselling authors. It's got Jim Butcher, Rachel Kane, Nancy Holder, Peter Beagle, uh, Cami Garcia, Heather Brewer. So all these huge name authors, I got to. I mean, I felt like such an imposter because I'm editing their work. No, I'm not. These are reprints. They don't need editing. I'm assembling it and putting it out there into the world and helping sell it. But that got my that started a hunger for doing that again. And so my subsequent anthologies, I came up with a proposal. I got authors to agree in principle to participate if I could, assuming they were available, assuming the deal paid what they were worth, and I would sell the
Now
concept.
is Henry, now's a good time to show everybody the books.
Okay, sure. So the one that's come out most recently is the Hanukkah one you mentioned. It's Festival of Lights. Um, Hanukkah stories, although this is, the protagonists are Jewish kids, but these stories have universal lessons. So I wouldn't say it's limited to just Jewish buyers and readers. So some of the amazing authors in this one: Kimberly Brubaker Bradley, Nancy Chernin, Stacia Deutsch, Bridget Hodder, Nancy Holder, Alan Katz, Ginny Koch, Nancy Krullick, Joanne Levy, Terry Liebenson, Richard Michelson, Leslie Newman, Erica Pearl, Rachel Romero, Alan Silberberg. So uh, if those are big names in children's literature, it was a thrill to get to work with them. I have a story in there as well, and my story is a science fiction story. It's set in the present, but so anyway, I really enjoyed doing that. My co-editor on, oh, sorry, this is my most recent one. The first few anthologies that I did, I co-edited with somebody else who had done it before. And then coming out in just a couple weeks is an adult fantasy anthology, Combat Monster. So imagine the battles of World War II, the historical battles, but there was a monster involved. So, was there a dragon at the Battle of the Bulge? Were there trolls at Okinawa? That kind of thing. So that was really fun to do. Again, combining my passions. Again, big name authors: Peter Clines, Tanya Huff, Jonathan Mayberry, David Mack, Jeremy Robinson, Scott Sigler, Catherine Stein, Harry Turtledove, Jane Yolen, and others. So that comes out in February. Really excited about that.
Some of these authors have been on the show. Yes, I see your glasses were taken over by aliens for a few minutes.
Yeah, sorry.
No, it's fine.
If I don't have my ring light on, then it's too dark in here. So
it's fine, but it's giving me ideas for a story here.
Good. Everything gives us ideas.
That's
the curse.
It's the curse and the blessing.
Right. Carry a notebook with you. You never know when a good idea is going to strike. I literally have had a book come out of seeing a refrigerator magnet in a store. It was this fun little magnet. It had pictures of these anthropomorphic fruits and vegetables, and they all were scowling, and it said steamed vegetables. And I was like, that's funny. First of all, I love puns. I love idioms. Could I write a picture book featuring anthropomorphic fruits and vegetables? And it turns out the answer is yes, I can. So I ended up writing it, and that one I sold to Schiffer, called Good Egg and Bad Apple. So it's again, it's filled with wordplay, but also anthropomorphic fruits and vegetables.
Fantastic. So Henry, in addition to your advice to persevere, any other advice you want to share before I ask you a question that I can ask only you?
Well, if you're asking to offer advice for aspiring writers, I would say read widely in your genre and beyond. Read what's contemporary. If you want to write picture books, Dr. Seuss is a classic, but Dr. Seuss is not how picture books look today. So go to a bookstore, go to a library, read books published in the last few years to get a real sense of what publishers are interested in and how books are done. you have to study it. I mean, it's like a project. You need to invest the time in understanding the craft, because then you'll be able to produce something that publisher would be like, yes, we can sell. This is well written, it's interesting, and we can sell it, because you're making the art, but they have to sell the art. So you have to think about both sides of that.
That's great advice. And finally, so I want to go back to your career as an engineer. I believe that our ability as storytellers is also part of our success in the science and engineering fields. Scientists have to be storytellers. Engineers have to tell stories. It's not just about showing the data.
That's an interesting theory. I never thought of it that way. I mean, I guess it's true. You have to communicate your ideas no matter what they are, no matter what you do, you have to communicate them.
So listen, I'm going to invite you back on the show when I Am Wind and I Am Light come out, and we can have a whole talk about the science and science and literature and everything in between. In the meantime, wave your brand new book, gorgeous book, I Am Gravity. Everybody run out and buy this gorgeous book by Henry Herz, illustrated by Mercè López.
Who I've never met, by the way. She lives in Barcelona, so I've never met her.
I'll meet her next time I go, and I'll send you a selfie with her. Henry Herz, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much, and I hope we'll be in touch. And I am Mel Rosenberg, the host of the Children's Literature channel of the New Books Network, and I've been here with this incredible polymath of a human being and writer. Henry, thanks a million.
Thank you, Mel. It's a pleasure being here. Thank you.
Thanks so much.